Welcome everyone to AI Buddhism University. I'm Ren. And I'm En. Today we're going to dive deep, really deep, into Japan's past to uncover a story about religion and power, a story that might just change how you see one of its most iconic symbols, the Shinto shrine.
That's right. Okay, and let's just jump right in.
So, I want to start with a question that, gets right to the heart of it. We all have this image of Shinto shrines as these timeless, ancient fixtures of the Japanese landscape. But what if that image, the grand wooden halls, the meticulously kept grounds, was actually a relatively modern invention? What if it wasn't born from some ancient organic tradition, but from a deliberate political project?
Rin, that is precisely the mystery we're unraveling today. The story of the shrine is really the story of how abstract gods were given a physical form, not by the will of the people, but by the will of the state.
To really get this, you have to imagine a time before those grand wooden halls, or shrines, even existed. See, in ancient Japan, worship wasn't contained within walls at all. It was directed right at nature itself, at these awe-inspiring mountains, powerful waterfalls, and, as our key example will show, gigantic rocks. These were believed to be the landing spots for the gods, the kami.
So you're saying no buildings, no priests in special robes, just people in raw nature?
Exactly. The sacred space was the landscape itself.
So this slide takes us to the sacred island of Akinoshima, which is just a perfect case study for this. In the earliest stage, we can see, from around the late 4th to early 5th century, rituals were incredibly direct. People would literally climb on top of these massive rock formations to leave their offerings.
Wow. So they were placing their gifts right where they believed the gods physically touched the earth. That's an incredibly intimate form of worship.
It's very intimate and completely integrated with the natural world. But as we'll see, that was all about to change. Now, fast forward to the late 7th century, and something has definitely shifted. As you can see here, the rituals are no longer performed on the rocks, but in the shade, beside them.
So it's a subtle change, but a really important one. It's kind of like moving from being in the throne room to waiting in the antechamber. There's suddenly this separation between the worshiper and the deity.
That's a perfect analogy. And the timing here is absolutely no accident. This change happened just as Japan's very first centralized government, the Ritsuryo state, was beginning to flex its muscles. And this slide shows the final stage of that transformation, Ono-Kinoshima. By the 8th century, the rituals had moved completely away from the rocks into these specially prepared open spaces. And the offerings? They were now purpose-made, standardized artifacts.
Right, so worship is becoming more organized, more formalized, and physically removed from that original wild sacred spot. It's starting to look less like a natural phenomenon and a lot more like a planned event.
Okay, so this timeline really lays it all out for us. The whole story in miniature. We go from direct contact on the rocks to the shade beside them, and finally to a completely separate man-made ritual space. It's a really clear progression from natural to formal.
Precisely. And this evolution on one tiny island is a microcosm of a nationwide revolution. So the question that hangs over all of this is, what or who was driving this dramatic change?
And the answer, in a word, is power. This wasn't some gentle, organic evolution of faith. It was a top-down project, driven by the political ambitions of Japan's emerging imperial government. A revolution from above. That's right. During the reigns of Emperor Tenmu and Empress Jito, the court launched this, an unprecedented project. Their goal was to take the thousands of diverse, local, and frankly often unruly kami and organize them into a single hierarchical system, with the emperor and the imperial family's gods right at the very top. So it's about more than just religion then. It sounds like they were trying to build a national identity and centralize their own power at the same time. Exactly that. To control the land, you first had to control its gods. Okay, but how do you even begin to do that? I mean, how do you take these powerful, ancient nature spirits and just file them into a government database?
You write a manual. You create a rule book so detailed that it dictates everything, making sure that from the capital to the farthest provinces, everyone is worshiping the right way, which is to say, the state's way. And that manual was the Engishiki.
The Engishiki was a truly monumental work of bureaucracy. You should think of it as a detailed corporate handbook for running the entire country, and a huge portion of it was dedicated to religious affairs, laying out precisely which gods were officially recognized and exactly how their state-sanctioned rituals were to be performed.
A corporate manual for the gods. I absolutely love that.
So how did this divine corporation roll out its big plan?
Well, it had a very clear three-step strategy. First, they designated official government shrines, or kansha. Second, they established the hanpei system, where standardized offerings flowed from a central Office of Deities, the Jingikan, out to these official shrines. And third, and this is the most visible part, they mandated the construction of permanent shrine halls, the shaden.
Okay, let me see if I've got this straight. The Jingikan in the capital is like corporate headquarters. They pick their official franchises, the kansha. They send out standardized company products, the hanpei offerings. And then they demand every franchise build its store to the exact same brand specifications, the shaden buildings. They were literally branding local gods.
That is a brilliant and perfectly accurate way to describe what was happening.
Okay, so HQ sends out the new corporate branding guide. But, as anyone who's worked in a big company knows, a plan from the top is one thing. Getting the local branches to actually follow it, well, that's another battle entirely. Did this grand vision actually roll out smoothly?
Not at all. There was a significant gap between the state's grand vision and the reality on the ground.
And we have direct evidence of this. As this quote from our source material reveals, the government had to issue these orders to build and maintain shrines over and over and over again.
Right. The key takeaway here is that they had to keep sending the same memo because people were ignoring it. This tells us that local communities were either unable or, maybe just unwilling to fall in line immediately.
It suggests a long period of negotiation and sometimes even resistance to this new centralized model. The state, of course, had ways to enforce its will. One of its most powerful tools was a practice called haimo. This decreed that during major state-sponsored rituals, all other government business, from tax collection to court cases, had to completely stop.
Wow, that's a serious power move. It's like a mandatory all-hands meeting for the entire country, forcing every single bureaucrat to stop what they're doing and acknowledge how important the state's rituals are. It's a way of saying, look, this is what matters most.
It was a powerful symbolic act, and it was designed to forge a sense of unity between the ruler and the ruled, all centered on these new state gods. Okay, so we've established the political motive. The state wanted to consolidate power by organizing and branding the gods. But I feel like we're still missing a huge piece of the puzzle here.
Go on.
Where did they even get the idea for this? I mean, the whole concept of putting gods in buildings, creating a systematic organization, where did that blueprint even come from?
That is the final and perhaps the most crucial question. And the answer leads us to the hidden influence that shaped this entire project.
Let's pose the question directly. In a culture of nature worship, of sacred rocks and mountains without any permanent structures, where did the government find the template for a religion with grand halls, organized priesthoods, and a clear, systematic structure? It couldn't have just come from nowhere. Was there another model already available? There was, and it was already in Japan, and it was incredibly powerful. This slide reveals the answer through a really powerful contrast. On one side, you have the indigenous traditions we've been talking about, worship at natural sites for invisible spirits with no permanent buildings. And on the other side, wow, you have the Buddhist model. Magnificent temple complexes, grand architecture, and most importantly, visible, awe-inspiring statues and icons. It was systematic, visual, and highly organized, a complete, ready-made religious system. And this is where it all comes together. The creation of the Shinto shrine as we know it, with its permanent buildings and its formal rituals, was not an isolated event. It was a direct response to Buddhism.
So you're saying the state saw the immense power and prestige of Buddhist temples and realized their native kami needed a serious institutional and visual upgrade to even compete. Buddhism provided the template for how to package a god.
Precisely. They needed to give the indigenous kami a form, a home, and an institutional weight that could stand alongside the impressive power of this imported faith. So what this really boils down to is that the story of the first shrines isn't just about architecture. It's the story of the state creating a national identity by packaging and selling its gods. And most importantly, it marks the beginning of a long, complex, and absolutely fascinating dance between two great religious traditions. This was the true prologue to Shinbutsu Shugo, the centuries-long blending of Shinto and Buddhism that would come to define Japanese culture for 1,000 years.
That's incredible. It really makes you wonder what else we take for granted as ancient is actually the result of a forgotten political project. What happens when the will of the state decides to reshape the very nature of faith?
It creates a history far more complex and fascinating than we could ever imagine. Finally, we have a brief apology and a request. Here at AI Buddhism University, we try our best to minimize the mispronunciation of complex Buddhist terminology, but due to the limitations of AI technology, some occasional errors might slip through. Please forgive us. If you have any advice on how to improve the AI's pronunciation, we would love to borrow your wisdom, so please let us know in the comments. We will continue to cover fascinating topics like biographies of great monks, sutra explanations, and the hidden history of Buddhism, so we are also waiting for your topic requests in the comments. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. We'll see you in the next explanation. Thank you for listening.